Christmas Eve. Snow drifted past the windows of the Ashford Room in downtown St. Paul, where families crowded around candlelit tables and laughter seemed to rise from every corner. At one table near the window, no one was laughing. 71-year-old Vivian Caldwell sat alone. She had built a real estate fortune worth nearly $2 billion. Tonight, none of it could fill the two empty chairs across from her. Her dinner sat untouched. At the next table, a family suddenly burst into laughter over something a little boy had said. Vivian lowered her eyes. She lifted the corner of her linen napkin and pressed it beneath one eye. That was when the front door opened. Oliver Grant stepped in from the snow with his 7-year-old twins, Maisie and Milo. Oliver was a single father, though no one in the restaurant knew that yet. He wore a dark winter coat that had seen several Minnesota winters, one hand holding Milo's, the other resting lightly against Maisie's shoulder as the hostess greeted them. Maisie saw Vivian almost immediately. She stopped. "Dad." Oliver glanced down. Maisie nodded toward the window. "That lady's crying." Oliver followed her eyes. Vivian had already lowered the napkin, trying to compose herself. Maisie looked toward the small box of tissues beside the hostess stand. "Can I give her one?" Oliver hesitated. He didn't want his children wandering into a stranger's private grief and making a painful moment worse. "You can ask her," he said quietly. "And if she wants to be left alone, you come right back." Maisie nodded. She took 2 tissues and walked across the room. Milo watched his sister go. Then he looked down at the small Christmas star in his hands. He and Maisie had made it that afternoon from thin craft wood, tracing paper left over from Oliver's drafting supplies, and a tiny battery light. Milo followed. Vivian looked up when Maisie reached her table. "Ma'am?" Vivian blinked. Maisie held out the tissues. "These are softer." Vivian looked at the linen napkin in her hand, then at the little girl. For a moment, she could not speak. She accepted the tissues carefully. "Thank you." Milo arrived beside his sister. His eyes moved to the 2 empty chairs, then to the little star. Without asking a question, he placed it between the chairs and switched on the tiny light. "You can have ours." Vivian stared at it. The star was slightly crooked, with a wrinkle in the tracing paper where the glue had dried too quickly. Beside the polished silver on Vivian's table, it looked impossibly small. Her mouth trembled. The tears she had fought all evening finally spilled over. 2 children who knew nothing about her had seen that she was hurting and decided not to look away. Vivian pressed one of Maisie's tissues beneath her eyes. The little star glowed between the 2 empty chairs. Across the room, Oliver saw her begin to cry harder. His stomach tightened. He had agreed to let Maisie offer a tissue. He had not expected Milo to follow, and now both children were standing at a stranger's table while the woman broke into tears. For one awful second, Oliver wondered whether they had touched something far more painful than they understood. He crossed the room quickly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." Vivian looked up. Oliver placed a protective hand lightly behind each twin. "They were trying to be kind. I should have stopped them before they crowded your table." Maisie looked worried. "Did we make you sad?" Vivian shook her head immediately. "No, sweetheart." Oliver was still uneasy. "If we've disturbed you, we'll go. I'm sorry." He began guiding the twins away. Vivian looked at the tissues in her hand, then at the little star glowing between those 2 empty chairs. "Please," Oliver stopped. "Would you let them stay for a minute?" He turned. Vivian looked at the twins, then at him. For decades, people had remained in rooms because Vivian paid them, employed them, needed something from them, or expected them to stay. This was different, actually. She drew a breath. "Would the 3 of you sit with me?" Oliver hesitated. Vivian noticed. "I know they weren't asking for anything." "No, ma'am. I know." Oliver looked at Milo and Maisie, then back at Vivian. "Just for a little while." Maisie climbed into the chair nearest Vivian. Milo sat across from her. A waiter quietly brought Oliver another chair. Vivian looked at the star again. "You made this yourselves?" "May and Milo," Maisie said. Milo shook his head. "Dad cut the wood." Oliver sat down. "I was promoted to saw operator." "You got glue on your sleeve," Milo said. "Occupational hazard." Vivian laughed. It was only one short sound, but it surprised her enough that she stopped afterward. Maisie smiled. "Do you like it? The star?" Maisie nodded. Vivian looked at it between the empty chairs. Very much. We made it for our window, Milo said. Maisie shrugged. We can make another. Vivian swallowed. That's very generous. The waiter approached with menus. Oliver started to explain that they already had another table. Vivian stopped him. Have dinner here. Vivian, the kids came over because they saw you were upset. You don't owe us anything. I know. She looked at the twins. That's why I'd like you to stay. Oliver studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. The children opened their menus. Maisie looked astonished by how many dishes she could not pronounce. Milo deliberately mispronounced one until his sister kicked him beneath the table. Vivian watched them. The restaurant around her was exactly as loud as before. Nothing about Christmas Eve had changed, but her table had. After the waiter left, Vivian asked, Do you always spend Christmas Eve somewhere this fancy? Oliver laughed. Definitely not. Maisie answered first. Mr. Delaney gave Dad a dinner card. Oliver nodded. A client. He insisted we use it. Vivian turned toward the twins. What were you doing before you came here? Making the star, Milo said. And cookies, Maisie added. Milo looked at her. Those weren't good. They were fine. They were hard. Oliver shook his head. Your mother would be deeply offended by what both of you call cookies. The twins' expressions softened. Vivian noticed. Their mother? Oliver rested his hands loosely on the table. Hannah. A short pause. She died 18 months ago. Vivian's face changed. I'm sorry. Thank you. Maisie looked down at her menu. Mom burned cookies too. Milo corrected her. Only twice. Same Christmas. Still twice. Oliver leaned slightly toward Vivian. This argument has been active for 11 months. Vivian laughed again. Then she noticed Oliver laughing too. His wife was gone. His children were speaking about her. And somehow Hannah's name had not ruined Christmas. You talk about her often? Oliver glanced at Milo and Maisie. They're allowed to. Vivian grew still. For a moment, she looked past them toward the window. My husband died 6 years ago. Oliver's expression softened. I'm sorry. Thomas. She folded one of Maisie's tissues carefully between her fingers. His name was Thomas. Milo looked toward the empty chairs. Did he sit there? Vivian followed his gaze. Sometimes. Maisie touched the back of the other chair. What about these? Oliver glanced at his daughter. Maisie, it's all right. Vivian took a slow breath. My daughters used to sit there. Maisie's eyes widened. You have 2 daughters? Yes. Are they twins? Vivian looked at her, surprised. What made you ask that? Maisie pointed between herself and Milo. Because there's 2 of us too. Vivian's expression softened. Yes, they're twins. Milo asked. Are they grown-ups? Very grown-up. Do they live here? No. Vivian stopped there. They haven't spent Christmas with me for a long time. Maisie frowned. That's sad. No accusation. No solution. Just the truth, as a 7-year-old understood it. Vivian looked at the little star. Yes, she said quietly. It is. Oliver changed the subject gently. So, Milo, chocolate cake or bread pudding? Chocolate. Maisie shook her head. You didn't even look. I know what chocolate is. Within seconds, the twins were debating dessert, and Vivian realized Oliver had deliberately given her a way out of a conversation she was not ready to finish. Later, Milo mentioned that his father drew buildings after they went to bed. Vivian looked at Oliver. You're an architect? Licensed, yes. That's why you were staring at the ceiling when you came in. Oliver looked surprised. You saw that? I notice people. What did you think I was doing? Trying to decide whether something was wrong. Oliver glanced toward the archway. Nothing dangerous. What then? He pointed discreetly toward one repaired section of decorative molding. That piece is newer. Whoever replaced it copied a profile from the wrong period. Vivian looked up. You saw that walking in? Oliver shrugged. Old buildings usually tell you when someone stopped listening to them. The sentence stayed with Vivian. What firm are you with? I'm independent now. He explained only enough. 13 years in architecture. A regional firm before Hannah died. Travel and long hours had become difficult once 2 children depended on him alone. Now he took smaller local projects that kept him close enough to be a father first. Vivian did not offer him work. She simply listened. By the time dinner ended, the meal she had barely touched earlier was gone. Oliver helped Milo into his coat while Maisie fought with a stubborn zipper. Vivian looked at Oliver. "Do you have a business card?" He paused. "I think so." He found one with a slightly bent corner. Vivian read it. Oliver Grant, AIA, Architecture, Preservation, Adaptive Reuse. She slipped it into her handbag. At the door, Maisie turned around. "Vivian." A few diners glanced over. "Don't forget your star." Vivian looked back. The small light was still glowing between the two empty chairs. "I won't." Oliver took the twins' hands and led them into the snow. Vivian remained at the table. For the first time in 6 Christmases, the chairs were still empty, but they no longer felt quite as cold. If stories about kindness, family, and second chances mean something to you, subscribe to Soul Dad Stories. 2 days later, the star sat on Vivian Caldwell's dining table. Vivian slid Oliver's business card toward Nina, her longtime assistant. "Find out whether he's qualified for outside consulting work. Professional review? Only professional. His license was active, his record clean, and his references confirmed 13 years of strong work in preservation and adaptive reuse." Vivian told Nina to put him through the normal consultant process. A week later, Oliver sat in a conference room at Caldwell Civic Properties with Vivian, Nina, and Victor Klein, the company's chief operating officer. The offer was a 120-day consulting contract to assess 3 aging properties. Oliver read the first pages, then looked at Vivian. "Why me? Christmas dinner made me look twice. Your license, your work, and your references are why you're sitting here." Vivian paused. "I don't hire people because their children are kind to me." "Good." Victor tapped the packet. "Your recent work is smaller than what you handled at your former firm." "It is, and you haven't led anything at this scale in several years." "No. Then you understand why this begins with assessment work." "I'd be worried if it didn't." The contract was legitimate. Defined scope, standard fee, independent engineering support where needed. Oliver accepted. The first 2 properties were straightforward. The third was not. Frogtown Community Arts Hall had been closed for 7 years. An old engineering report described major foundation failure, roof deterioration, and recommended demolition. Oliver read it twice. "Where are the movement records?" Victor frowned. "For the foundation, there are photographs. I see those. Where are the measurements over time? This building has been closed for years, Mr. Grant. We're not trying to save every old brick in Street Paul." "I'm not saying the report is wrong." Victor waited. Oliver tapped the conclusion. "I'm saying I wouldn't sign my name under that conclusion yet. Demolition paperwork can move in about 30 days. Oliver closed the file. "Then give me 30 days. 3 mornings later, Oliver stood inside Frogtown Hall with structural engineer Dana Reeve. The building had real problems. Water intrusion, cracking, roof damage, rot near the western side. But the worst cracking clustered near years of drainage failure, and the broad foundation conclusion did not fit everything they were seeing. Dana studied the wall. "You think the old report blamed water damage on the foundation? I think someone may have reached a big conclusion before they had enough evidence. Then we test." "Exactly." In a back room, Oliver found old photographs waiting for archival transfer. One showed Thomas Caldwell beside a group of teenagers holding sketchboards. When Oliver showed Nina, she smiled. Thomas volunteered there. Bought supplies. Helped with Saturday art programs. Was he an architect? Nina laughed. Thomas couldn't draw a straight line. Another photograph showed the main hall decades earlier. Across the wooden floor lay an 8-point patch of sunlight. Oliver looked closer. What was above this? Nina shook her head. No idea. Initial testing soon suggested that the old foundation conclusion had been overstated. Oliver asked Vivian to visit the hall. She resisted at first. Frogtown had Thomas in it. She had avoided the place since his death. But 2 days later, Vivian walked through its doors. Oliver handed her the photograph. Her face changed immediately. He used to come here on Saturdays, Nina told me. He said teenagers listened better than executives. Oliver smiled. Was he right? Usually. Vivian held the photograph a little longer. He loved places people actually used. He used to tell me I could calculate the value of every square foot in a building without knowing whether anybody was happy inside it. Sounds like he knew you pretty well. He did. Her voice softened. The girls came here with him a few times. Audrey and Elena? Vivian nodded. Oliver had never asked why the daughters were gone. He did not ask now. Vivian told him anyway. The first Christmas after Thomas died, they came home. Both of them. Their husbands. The grandchildren. Boxes of decorations everywhere. A faint smile appeared. One of the grandchildren told a story about Thomas and the Christmas lights. Audrey imitated him. Everyone laughed. Her smile vanished. And I couldn't stand it. Oliver stayed quiet. They were laughing in his house. At his stories. Without him, she stared toward the dark stage. I thought they were already learning how to live as if he had never been there. Vivian drew a breath. Audrey told me, "Mom, Dad loved hearing this house laugh." Her eyes closed briefly. I told her not to tell me what my husband would have wanted. Oliver knew there was more. Elena said he was their father too. Vivian tightened her fingers around the photograph, and I told them, "If you can laugh in this house without him, take your Christmas somewhere else." The hall seemed to absorb the words. They left that night. Oliver looked at her. Did they come back? They tried. That answer surprised him. They called. They wrote. They invited me to visit. And you didn't? I sent gifts. Vivian gave a bitter little laugh. Money for the grandchildren, plane tickets, birthday presents. I thought providing for them was still a way of being their mother. Oliver stared at the old floor. For a while, I hated hearing the twins laugh too. Vivian turned. After Hannah? He nodded. Sometimes they'd be laughing at a cartoon, and I'd be standing there thinking, how can this house sound normal? Vivian watched him. What changed? Oliver looked toward Thomas's photograph. I realized they weren't leaving Hannah behind when they laughed. Nothing else. No advice. A few minutes later, Dana entered with fresh results. The foundation isn't the problem we thought it was. Oliver looked up. Then Dana nodded toward the western roof. But we need to open that structure before anyone celebrates. The opening began the next morning. By noon, the news was bad. Several roof members had deep decay caused by years of trapped moisture. Some could be reinforced. Others had to be replaced. Victor arrived before they finished. You said the foundation report overstated the problem. It did. Victor gestured toward the open ceiling. And now? Now we have a different problem. How expensive? I don't know yet. Victor's expression hardened. That's becoming a familiar answer. Oliver met his eyes. It's the only honest one. By the end of the day, everyone had the same information. Oliver had been right about the foundation. He had underestimated the roof. Both things could be true. A week later, City Archives located the original roof drawing. The 8-point feature from the old photograph had been a decorative glass ceiling inset, covered during a later renovation. Dana glanced at Oliver. You're thinking about the star. I'm thinking we're opening this part of the roof anyway. If restoring it creates structural problems, it stays covered. It doesn't. Then price it. The revised board presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. That morning, a snow emergency closed the schools. Oliver tried his usual backup options. None worked. Finally, he called Ruth Morales, a neighbor who had known Hannah for years and had offered to help more times than he could count. Could you keep the twins for a few hours? Of course. Oliver hesitated. I hate asking. Ruth's voice softened. You're not handing off being their father. You're letting somebody help you be one. Oliver looked at Milo pouring too much cereal into a bowl and Maisie coming downstairs in 2 different socks. Thank you. At 9 o'clock, Oliver stood before the Caldwell board. He started with the bad news. The roof damage is more extensive than our initial estimate. How much more? Victor asked. Original rehabilitation estimate was about $2.7 million. The revised number is $3.05. Victor leaned forward. This is precisely the problem. Every wall you open creates another invoice. Oliver nodded. Sometimes, but demolition creates invoices too. A basic demolition and replacement plan came in at roughly $4.4 million. Oliver kept the rest simple. The foundation was not failing the way the old report suggested. The roof required substantial repair. Dana's team had identified what had to be replaced and what could remain. The work could be staged. Victor waited until Oliver finished. Why should this board accept additional risk based on your judgment? Oliver took a breath. It shouldn't. Several faces changed. He pointed toward Dana's signed report. It should accept the independent engineer's findings, the verified cost model, and the fact that you can stop after stabilization if the numbers stop working. He looked around the table. If my name is the only reason this project survives, don't approve it. The board approved a limited stabilization and validation phase, not full restoration. Not yet. After the meeting, Nina caught Oliver in the hallway. Which engineering appendix did you submit last night? The final one. She showed him the board packet. An older version had been circulated. Upload mistake? Nina opened the document history. The correct file was uploaded. She looked at him. Then it was replaced. The issue went to compliance and outside counsel. The trail was not complicated. Victor had directed staff to circulate the earlier appendix, which weakened the restoration case. Then counsel found the reason that choice mattered even more. Victor had failed to disclose a financial interest connected to the parent company involved in the proposed demolition and redevelopment deal. Preferring demolition was not the violation. Hiding a financial interest and altering what the board saw was. Vivian read the preliminary findings alone. For years, Victor had been one of the people she trusted most with daily operations. She closed the report and let the formal process continue. On the desk beside it sat a different problem. A letter to her daughters. Her first drafts were full of what Vivian wanted. I miss you. Life is too short. Your father would want us together. Then she finally saw the problem. Every version was still asking Audrey and Elena to relieve her pain. A few days later, Vivian stopped by Frogtown during a scheduled progress meeting. Milo and Maisie were there briefly before Ruth picked them up. Maisie found the old photograph of Thomas. That's him? Vivian nodded. That's Thomas. Milo studied the picture. He looks funny. Milo, Oliver said. Vivian laughed. He was. Soon the twins were arguing over a story about a snowman Hannah once built. Oliver laughed with them. Then his face changed for only a second. A brief ache. Nobody panicked. Nobody stopped saying Hannah's name. Vivian saw it. After the twins left, she asked Oliver, "How did you apologize when grief made you difficult to live with?" Oliver thought about it. I told them exactly what I did. That night, Vivian opened the letter again. This time she stopped writing about how lonely she was. Audrey, Elena, I was wrong when I punished you for laughing that Christmas. You had lost your father too. Your children had lost their grandfather. I treated your happiness as if it meant you loved him less. It didn't. You both tried to reach me afterward. I answered with gifts, money, plane tickets, and everything except the words I owed you. I hurt you. I am sorry. I do not expect this letter to repair 6 years. If you ever want to speak, I will listen. Vivian sent it herself. No gift, nothing attached. Audrey answered the next evening. I read it. I need time. But thank you for finally saying it. Vivian covered her mouth. It was not forgiveness, but it was a door. 3 days later, Audrey agreed to a phone call. The first few minutes were awkward. Weather, work, the grandchildren. Then Vivian said, I'm sorry. Audrey cried. Vivian did too. Neither woman said everything was fixed. When the call ended, Elena still had not responded. The final board meeting took place the following week. Oliver presented the completed validation findings. Frogtown Hall could be restored safely under Dana's staged structural plan, and the revised cost remained well below demolition and replacement. He finished with one sentence. This isn't a case for saving every old building. It's a case for not throwing one away until we know what it actually is. Then outside counsel summarized the altered board packet and Victor's undisclosed financial interest. Victor was allowed to respond. I believe demolition was the stronger business decision. That opinion was within your authority, the attorney said. Victor looked toward Oliver. I believed his case was too optimistic. The attorney asked the question that mattered. Then why didn't you disclose your financial interest and let the board evaluate both? Victor had no good answer. An hour later, his employment was terminated for conflict of interest and governance violations. His unvested performance compensation was forfeited under company policy, and the relevant transaction records were transferred to independent counsel for any further review required. No one shouted. No police arrived. Later that afternoon, Oliver saw Victor near the elevators carrying one cardboard box. Victor looked at the rolled Frogtown plans under Oliver's arm. I kept calling that place obsolete because it made the numbers easier. Oliver listened. Victor looked down. Then I started doing the same thing to people. He drew a slow breath. I was wrong. Oliver did not tell him it was okay. It wasn't. Then own what comes after the apology. Victor nodded. I will. The elevator doors closed. The board authorized full restoration. For the first time, Frogtown Community Arts Hall was no longer waiting to be demolished. And for the first time in 6 years, Vivian had one daughter speaking to her again. But Elena's chair was still empty. The restoration took 10 months. Dana's structural team supervised the roof repairs. Qualified tradespeople replaced what could not be saved and preserved what still could. 8 paid trainees from the neighborhood joined the project under experienced supervision. Oliver coordinated the work without pretending to be the expert in every room. When the engineer needed more testing, he waited. When a tradesperson had a better way to preserve an old detail, he listened. And at home, he got better at asking Ruth for help before a problem became an emergency. Audrey began calling Vivian more often. Elena did not. Vivian drafted another message once, then deleted it. She had promised to respect Elena's pace. This time she meant it. Frogtown Community Arts Hall reopened on a clear November afternoon. The restored building looked cared for, not new. Inside, the 8-point glass ceiling inset had returned. When sunlight reached the right angle, a pale star spread across the floor. Milo and Maisie stood inside it. Maisie looked down. It's bigger than ours. Milo considered that. Ours lights up at night. Good point. Near the entrance, a small historical display included old photographs of the people who had served the hall over the years. Thomas appeared in one. No gold plaque, no grand dedication, just his name beneath the photograph. Thomas Caldwell, community volunteer. Vivian stood in front of it. Then a voice behind her said, "Mom." Vivian stopped. She knew the voice before she turned. Audrey stood near the entrance with her husband. For a moment, neither woman moved. Vivian waited. Audrey came first. The hug lasted only a few seconds. Careful, a little awkward, real. When they stepped apart, Vivian said, "Thank you for coming." Audrey looked toward Thomas's photograph. "I wanted to see it." Vivian looked toward the entrance once. Audrey noticed. Elena didn't come. Vivian nodded. "I understand." She saw the pictures. Vivian looked up. "She read your letter more than once." Vivian wanted to ask what Elena had said. She did not. "Okay." Audrey reached for her hand. Only for a moment. Across the hall, Maisie appeared beside Oliver. "Where's the other daughter? Not ready yet." Maisie accepted that. "Okay." A month later, after a formal candidate review, the board chose Oliver to lead Caldwell's new adaptive reuse studio. He called the twins. Maisie answered, "Dad? I got the job." A pause. "Do you have to wear a tie?" "Sometimes." "That's bad." Oliver laughed. Then Maisie's voice softened. "Will you still pick us up?" "Yes." "Okay. Then it's good." Christmas came again, 1 year after Vivian had sat alone at the Ashford room. Snow-covered downtown street, Paul. Inside the restaurant, families filled nearly every table. Vivian arrived early. Audrey came with her husband and children. Their relationship was not magically restored. 6 years did not disappear because one letter finally said the right thing. But there had been calls. Then a visit. Then another. The careful silence between them had begun to loosen. Oliver arrived with Milo and Maisie. Maisie had lost one front tooth. Milo had decided his Christmas sweater was aggressively itchy. Vivian stood. "You're late." Oliver checked his watch. 2 minutes. I noticed. Maisie hugged Vivian. Milo did too, although he pretended it had happened accidentally. Then Vivian reached into her bag. She took out the little wooden star. Milo stared. "You still have it." Vivian looked offended. "I was specifically told not to forget it." Maisie picked it up. One edge of the tracing paper had softened. A glue mark was still visible. "You didn't fix this part." Vivian looked at her. "Was I supposed to?" Maisie thought about it. "No." Milo switched on the tiny light. It still worked. Vivian placed the star in the center of the table. This year, the table was bigger. Audrey and her family were there. Oliver, Milo, Maisie, Vivian. And one chair remained empty. No one mentioned it. Vivian did not stare toward the entrance. She had written Elena one truthful letter. Elena knew where she was. That had to be enough. Dinner began. Maisie was explaining why school mashed potatoes should legally be classified as glue when the front door opened. Oliver happened to be facing it. He saw the woman before Vivian did. Dark winter coat, shoulder-length brown hair streaked lightly with gray. A man beside her, 2 children behind them. Oliver stopped listening. Audrey followed his eyes. Her hand went to her mouth. Vivian noticed. She turned. Elena stood near the hostess. For several seconds, the restaurant continued around them. The piano kept playing. A waiter passed with a tray. A year earlier, Oliver and 2 children had walked into the same room while Vivian cried. The restaurant had not changed then. It did not change now. Only Vivian's world did. She stood. Elena saw her. Neither smiled. Not at first. Elena walked toward the table. Vivian's hands trembled. Elena. Her daughter stopped in front of her. I'm here. Those 2 words were enough. Vivian's eyes filled. Thank you. Elena looked at the empty chair. This doesn't mean everything is fixed. Vivian nodded. I know. I'm serious. So am I. A silence. Then Vivian pulled the chair back slightly. Sit whenever you're ready. Something in Elena's face softened. She sat. Dinner did not suddenly become easy. There were pauses. Questions asked too carefully. Children rescuing adults without knowing they were doing it. Milo asked Elena's son whether he played video games. Maisie discovered that Elena's daughter hated mint too. Audrey filled one awkward silence with a story about a delayed flight. Gradually, the table began to sound like a family. Then one of Vivian's grandchildren said, Mom told us Grandpa Thomas once put all the Christmas lights on the tree before checking them. Audrey laughed. He did. Elena looked across the table. 3 hours. 4, Audrey said. 3. He had to unwind the whole thing. Audrey began imitating Thomas standing beside the dark tree, insisting the problem had to be the outlet. Elena laughed. Her children laughed. Audrey's children laughed. Milo laughed even though he had never known Thomas. Maisie laughed because Milo did. Oliver smiled. Vivian did not. Not immediately. For one sharp second, she was back in her house 6 years earlier. The first Christmas without Thomas. The same sound, family laughter, a room where he should have been. Back then, every laugh had felt like another step away from him. She had wanted everyone to stay as broken as she was because she had mistaken pain for proof. Now Vivian looked around the table. They were laughing because of Thomas. His ridiculous Christmas lights. His stubbornness. The way he had apparently spent 4 hours refusing to admit Audrey had been right. He had not disappeared because they were happy. He was inside the story, inside the laughter, inside the grandchildren repeating things they had never seen themselves. Vivian's mouth trembled. Then she laughed. Audrey stopped for half a second. So did Elena. Vivian laughed again. Tears came with it. Maisie noticed first. Of course she did. Without saying anything, she reached toward the tissue box and pulled out several. She slid them toward Vivian. Vivian looked down, then at the little girl sitting across from her. A year earlier, Maisie had done the same thing when Vivian had been trying to cry quietly by herself. Vivian took one. I still need these. Maisie leaned closer. Sad tears? Vivian shook her head. Not tonight. Milo reached toward the center of the table. He switched on the star. The little light glowed between Audrey and Elena. The 2 chairs that had once been empty were finally filled. Later, while dessert was being served, Maisie looked toward the Christmas lights around the windows. Mom would have liked those. Oliver followed her gaze. For a second, Hannah appeared exactly where memory kept her, standing on a kitchen chair, holding a string of lights, insisting one side of the tree was darker than the other. Oliver smiled. She would have. The sentence did not stop Christmas. It became part of it. Vivian heard him, and finally understood what Oliver had shown her from the beginning. He had never stopped loving Hannah. He had simply stopped asking the living to prove that love by staying miserable. Vivian looked at Audrey, then Elena, at the grandchildren, at Oliver, at Milo and Maisie, at the crooked little star. Nothing on that table erased Thomas. Nothing ever would. The little star had never been magical. It had simply been a gift from 2 children who saw someone alone and chose not to walk past. It could not bring Thomas or Hannah back. But sometimes rebuilding begins with something much smaller than a miracle. Someone noticing what others have stopped seeing, and caring enough to stay.